Okay, we're live streaming.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, members of the public, members of the state board, and members of MSDE staff. This is a meeting of the Education Policy Committee of the Maryland State Board of Education. Thank you very much for joining us this evening as we take a look at some 6th and 7th grade social studies frameworks, a COMAR regulation, and have a brief legislative review. Information about our meetings can be found on the Maryland State Board website for upcoming meetings should you choose to tune in. To get going this evening, I think we're going to be starting with our 6th and 7th grade social studies frameworks. I believe are being presented by Mr. Ramsey. Is that correct? Ms.
Yes.
Collins, or Dr. Collins, are you starting?
Yep, I'll start. I'm going to kick it off to Peter Finn. Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, I had the wrong name on the.
No, you have the right name. He goes
It's
by
fine.
both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Let me
Well,
just prepare
welcome. And Zach, it's okay if Peter shares screen?
Yes, he should be able to.
Perfect. Great. Okay, we'll just get that pulled up. All right, great. So good evening, members of the Education Policy Committee, stakeholders, and those who are viewing. We're really excited to have this opportunity to share with you information, specifically as it relates to the grade 6 to 7 social studies frameworks and the revision process. And we're also going to talk about the overall process for developing, revising, and adopting frameworks, standards, curriculum, all those definitions and things of that piece, and its alignment to the blueprint. Most importantly, which we're so excited about and which is beneficial, that this process includes stakeholders, educators, and experts in the field in various content areas. So you will see and learn how that's built off into the process. So with that said, I'll kick it over to Finn to get us started.
First and foremost, good evening. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight. This is the culmination, these 6th and 7th grade frameworks are the culmination of many hours of work with countless stakeholders. And I'm deeply grateful to be able to be here with you tonight. In front of you here is the presentation outline. One quick note, when we arrive at the appendix, we will discuss the universal procedures and processes for standards and curriculum resources adoption. Okay, our decision point. The Maryland State Department of Education Social Studies branch of the Office of Teaching Learning is requesting the adoption of and permission to publish the 6th and 7th grade social studies frameworks by the Maryland State Board of Education. So a couple of key elements of the decision that I want to highlight first and foremost is the robust and varied engagement that Dr. Collins mentioned earlier. We engaged with all of our LEA supervisors as well as teachers throughout the process of building these frameworks. I also want to highlight the importance of geographical thinking skills. You'll see as we go through this process, through this presentation, that geography is one of the key tenets of these 6th and 7th grade social studies frameworks. And how those geographical thinking skills are key to overall literacy growth. And finally, I also want to highlight the need for our 6th and 7th grade frameworks to become in alignment with our overarching standards. These 6th and 7th grade frameworks will be the last of our K through 12 classes to come into alignment. I know there's many different ways that the term frameworks can be used. And so I think it would be helpful as we walk through this to briefly discuss how we're going to be defining the curriculum frameworks. Frameworks are defined as supporting curricular documents and provide guidance for implementing the state standards in social studies, which are reviewed and adopted by the Maryland State Board of Education every 8 years. State frameworks are also provide consistency in learning expectations for students in social studies programs across the 24 local education agencies as local curriculum is developed and adopted using these documents as a foundation. And this last point is really important. While the standards are compulsory, the frameworks are not. So some of the goals of the revision process. Goal one, as I mentioned earlier, is alignment. We wanted to make sure that we were able to bring the 6th and 7th grade frameworks into alignment with our standards. Goal two, LEA support. These frameworks act as a guide, as I mentioned before, for the local education agencies as they build out curricula. Goal three, innovation and effectiveness. While lecture and teaching through chronology have their place, they cannot be the sole focus of effective social studies instruction if we're to help our young learners gain essential background knowledge and skills they will need as they move forward in their educational pathway. And finally, and perhaps the most important, to build a strong platform for our learners to have success in secondary social studies classrooms. Okay, so why geography? Why focus on geographical thinking skills? Geography is one of our 4 standards, the 4th standard, but I wanted to unpack a little bit why we chose to dive into geography. First, geographical thinking skills are critical to student success in 8th grade US history, and as such, critical to their success in high school level social studies classes. But this next point is even almost more critical. Geographical thinking skills are an incredibly effective platform for building critical background knowledge, overall language comprehension, and overall literacy growth. In short, the revised frameworks and their focus on geographical thinking and background knowledge are a key component to building overall literacy proficiency. So the framework revision process. The framework revision process included stakeholder engagement throughout. 15 of the 24 LEAs were represented in the writing work group for these frameworks. All LEA supervisors were a part of the development of the frameworks. Academic reviews were completed by Dr. Richard Russo of Frostburg State and Dr. Todd Kenrick of Towson. And a survey along with the frameworks for review was provided to teachers as well, which I'll go into much more detail as we get further into the presentation. So I want to highlight now some of the body of engagement, in particular, the academic outreach and collaboration that we went through as we developed these frameworks. As part of MSDE's robust public engagement protocol, we worked with Dr. Todd Kenrick, as I mentioned before, of Towson, and Dr. Richard Russo of Frostburg State for the academic review portion of this framework development. Dr. Kenrick noted how the frameworks are a major step forward and praised their inquiry-based approach. Dr. Russo noted the ambitious and challenging nature of the frameworks and highlighted the influence of the National Geographic Standards as well as the AP Human Geography course framework. And then finally, MSDE also engaged with the Baltimore Jewish Council as well as the American Pacific Islander Work Group throughout the development of the revised frameworks. And I want to briefly touch on some of the teacher feedback that we received. As I've mentioned numerous times, robust public engagement was leveraged throughout this revision process, but we also wanted to hear from teachers. We understand that the success of any curriculum hinges on teacher support. To that effect, in a feedback survey administered by MSDE, teachers indicated overwhelmingly the new frameworks promoted inquiry, as well as provided opportunities for learners to make connections with current events. I also want to mention some of the formatting changes that are documented in these new frameworks. The revised frameworks addressed some formatting updates that were definitely necessary. Some of these include an inquiry-based format to reflect nationally recognized best practices, indicators, and objectives with interwoven standards throughout, an introduction that describes the overview of the development of the social studies frameworks, as well as a course overview that sets out the goals of the courses. Now I want to transition to talking a little bit about what is actually in these frameworks from a content perspective. As I mentioned earlier, these new frameworks don't focus on chronology. Generally, social studies content has always been taught through a relatively heavily historical, linear, and chronological lens. The revised frameworks, while still leaning on historical aspects, are organized around 4 major geographical themes, which are tied to enduring understandings that exemplify effective backwards planning. The 4 major themes of these frameworks: movement, human systems, human interactions with the environment, and place and region. These themes all allow for all 6 of our social studies standards to be taught while placing exceptional emphasis on geographical thinking. Here's a very brief snapshot of some of the curricular units that are embedded within the frameworks. The revised frameworks are designed to be blended 6th and 7th grade experience. That is, the 2 grade levels should not be taught in a vacuum to one another. Unit 8, the regional case study, is a culmination of the skills and knowledge that learners have been equipped with over the course of 2 years. These revised frameworks are embedded with the idea that inquiry is the heart of any effective social studies instruction, and as such, these frameworks are grounded in overarching essential questions which frame the inquiry for the learning process. So background knowledge in the revised frameworks. This slide is very important to the effectiveness and its embeddedness into the literacy program for our students. One of the most important aspects of literacy development is background knowledge. These frameworks are built with this in mind because they are designed to support learners as they build foundational understandings of the world, which they will need to leverage as they move into the secondary grades. In short, these frameworks leverage background knowledge as a launching pad for their high school experience, as well as their development as a young reader. These frameworks also blend background knowledge with skill development by focusing on how location affects events, ideas, communities, and individuals. And further, the frameworks are embedded with opportunities for discrete skill development, from claim construction to evidence evaluation and argumentative writing. The revised frameworks are specifically designed to be an effective scaffold that supports student success in higher grades and promote overall literacy growth. And finally, I want to touch on our professional learning outline. First and foremost, this professional learning plan is designed to be flexible to the needs of LEAs. We want to make sure that we are working with our LEA partners to best support them. But once these frameworks are adopted, MSDE will begin a robust plan of professional learning, starting with supervisor meeting drop-ins, as well as supervisor review sessions. The frameworks will be unpacked and analyzed at social studies collaborative meetings throughout the spring. Additional needs will be identified prior to the end of this school year that will inform the continued and ongoing professional learning program around these frameworks. And at this point, I'm going to transition to our appendix. Embedded in the appendix, I'll speak a little bit about the formation of the work groups that wrote these frameworks. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about the protocols and procedures for the adoption of curricular materials and standards. So we recognize that there are various terms used to explain and illustrate aspects of the standards adoption process. So we thought it would be very helpful to spell these out for the state board and stakeholders. Excuse me. We also want to note that these definitions and following processes apply to all content areas. The key terms and definitions are designed to make sure that MSDE, MSBE, as well as the public are aligned to the expectations and meaning of these key terms. 2 major distinctions that I want to briefly highlight. The first is the definition of the term significant change, a revision or edit that modifies the meaning and or intended student outcome related to a particular curricular resource or standard. And then secondly, the difference between content standards and curriculum frameworks, which I've already touched on briefly. Based off of a nationwide canvas of state adoption processes, MSDE has adopted an 8-year cycle for standards to be reviewed and/or readopted. Our nationwide scan included demographically and geographically similar states. The timeline distinguishes between standards, frameworks, and supporting curricular resources and details the 3 paths for approval for each, which you'll see very shortly. And this timeline offers a strong balance of accountability, responsiveness, and flexibility for both MSBE and MSDE. This flowchart displays what I was touching on just a moment ago. It displays the 6 pathways for adoption and readoption by MSBE and aligns to the document that was just shared. Each of the branches include varied and robust avenues for MSDE to engage with the public around standards and supporting curricular resources to be revised and readopted. The initial standards adoption process is the most robust and includes a 30-day public comment period as part of the formal rulemaking process. Revisions that are not significant changes follow a less lengthy path than an initial adoption and are presented to this committee for discussion. Finally, this plan will be built out to 2040 so that the board can see with ease the schedule of revisions and readoptions. Here you see the overall timeline going back to 2008, when each of the disciplines adopted or readopted or revised their frameworks or standards. We felt like being able to see the full continuity of when standards and frameworks had been adopted would be very helpful to add context as we work through this work. The schoolhouse icon indicates the target date for implementation. However, this date is designed to be flexible as the agency responds to LEA need and implements targeted support plans. Each of these stages will include multiple opportunities to engage with stakeholder groups. And eventually, we would like there to be one content area being readopted, revised each year over the course of the aforementioned 8-year cycle. And I'm going to end here. This is a list of the folks who were a part of the work group writing section of the revised framework. So you can see here the diverse group of stakeholders of teachers who came together to write our new 6th and 7th grade frameworks. And I will pause right there for questions.
Thank you. Is it possible to bring the chart down so that we can see members of the committee and see if anyone has questions that they'd like to? I can't see anyone to call on anyone.
Gotcha. Give me one moment. Yes, I can do that.
Thank you. Okay. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Okay, well, I do. When I was looking at the timeline that's there, I noticed, and I know this isn't your deal, and this is probably Dr. Collins that's going to need to answer this for me. Big gap in the number of years between revisions in math and ELA in particular. And then I also saw that it looks like there are 4 different ones coming up together in the same year in like 2024, 25. I don't have it in front of me, but something like that. Can you just kind of give me some insight on what the big gap is, particularly in math and ELA, and why we're trying to hit 4 of them at one time? I think it's like next year. That's
a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because that's something we've been grappling with internally. What we're trying to realign with is sort of what was done in the past, and try and get up to speed and on track with where we are now, especially with the cadence of Blueprint, and also looking at how the LEAs will be adopting like high quality instruction materials. And so that's why we said the calendar is kind of fluid as we gain more. You can see like right now we need to prioritize math and literacy for sure. And especially the timing is right just based on the data we're seeing in math and literacy and what curriculums are being used and where the LEAs are. It really is time to look at those standards. And so this is something that we're trying to mesh. There was a prior timeline and process in MSDE a while ago, but we are trying to mesh sort of what was before and kind of what makes sense and allow some flexibility. So I can tell you for sure, we'll probably be coming back to this committee or to the full board to provide a more an update around this as we get more in the weeds around what would make sense. And this is why we also did a state scan, because we wanted to see, you know, beyond what we know typically happened in Maryland, what does the landscape look like in other states around this process as well. Peter, anything you want to add as you looked at that, that I'm missing as we looked at that gap as well?
No, I think that's really well said. I would only add that that as we move forward from this year on, we're really trying to create a baseline. Obviously, things have been revised, frameworks have been adopted in a structured way prior to this, and this is our attempt to begin that structured process as we move forward, to kind of create that baseline, and then to create some regularity with which we are revisiting these processes, and so that MSDE and the board knows when they are happening.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Johnson, your hand is up.
Yes, sorry. So how are these standards aligned to the literacy standards?
That's what we need to investigate. Right now, there is alignment with some of the grade levels, but as you can see from the chart, the standards have not been looked at. I think it was back since 2008. And so that is the timing is right as we think about developing a statewide comprehensive literacy plan. We know the LEAs are developing literacy plans. We know it's a priority in the blueprint. The timing is right as we think about building out the comprehensive literacy plan. We'll also need to be doing this process with looking at the literacy standards.
I don't want it to be separate where the practitioners think that they have to do this,
Right.
geography, and have to do this in literacy. How do we make it all come together so it's seamless, so that students are getting the opportunity to practice literacy in all content areas?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. And that is the beauty of having a curriculum and instruction branch, because the design and the discussion of the frameworks is across content areas as well. So this conversation around literacy is something that Finn and I have had across content as well, even with not just within the social studies frameworks, but as we're designing all the frameworks, what does it look like across content areas? And as we look at different student groups as well.
All right. Okay. I just don't want it to get lost.
Absolutely. It is on our radar as well, and it's a very good flag.
Other questions? Is it possible to put up an example of one of the frameworks so that members of the board and members of the public can see the idea of the enduring understanding and the essential question, because that framework might not be something that they are necessarily familiar with. And I would love for that to be able to be shown to the public, and then kind of explain what enduring understanding is, what essential question is, so that these frameworks have some context if people decide to look at them in more detail.
Sure. Just give me one moment. I can would you like me to share my screen again?
That would be lovely. Thank you.
Okay, give me one moment. My apologies.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I have it right here. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Can you see my
Yes,
screen?
thank you.
Oh, great. Here is the aforementioned introduction that I mentioned before. As we kind of move down here, we have the course overview. It kind of outlines the the process for building out these frameworks, as well as some of the methodological pieces that were in place as we built this out. I'm going to move down here to, this is just kind of an overview of our standards in Maryland. And our standard 6.0, skills and processes. This is kind of an explanation using this document. Exactly what you're talking about, kind of unpacking what all those terms kind of mean. Enduring understandings, essential questions. And here we have content, topic, and the essential question. Enduring understandings are an overarching conceptual guideline for the unit that teachers can plan backwards from. Essentially knowing the end in mind as you go through your planning process. Essential questions are questions that frame that learning, that inquiry. They help students unpack the big ideas and the enduring understandings and the embedded social studies thinking skills. And I'll keep scrolling down.
If you can just kind of pick your favorite one there and just
Sure.
throw it for us and let us take a look just so the public can
Sure.
see what these frameworks look like.
Sure. So our first unit, geographical thinking, you can see here that the unit enduring understanding, geographers ask questions about movement, place and region, human systems, and human interaction with the environment to interpret the world we live in. So that is kind of the overarching thematic understanding that will guide the planning of a teacher in a classroom. The unit question, how would a geographer interpret Earth and the land now called the United States? Essential question, for these particular indicators and objectives is why study Earth and the people who live on it. So again, you can see the inquiry is embedded throughout each of these questions. And these are some possible objectives that students may work towards. Students will analyze geography as a tool for learning about the past, present, and planning for the future. By analyzing how the physical and human attributes or characteristics of a location make areas unique. Analyzing how people, goods, and ideas move across the planet through immigration, emigration, and mechanisms, and compare how humans recognize geographic limitations and strengths and create economic, social, political, cultural, and religious structures that connect and divide people across locations, region, and the globe. And so you can really see all of the different standards that we have for social studies embedded, while geography is the major lens through which these 6th and 7th grade frameworks have been built out. Each of the standards are embedded within all of the indicators and objectives with ample opportunity for background knowledge building and skill development.
Excellent, thank you. It's also easy to see what you could connect to.
Of course.
Writing and other disciplines across curriculums. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Hope I didn't put you too much on the spot there.
No, not at all. Not at all. Happy to do it.
Okay, and if you could pull that down, we'll see if anyone else has any other questions. Dr. Johnson, your hand's still up there?
No, but I'm going to ask another question about the anticipated or selective objectives that you have there. I know sometimes with when we push out curriculum for the LEAs, it becomes overwhelming for them. Are there any specific objectives that you want them to zero in on? And how would you make sure that they know what those are?
I think that's a great question. I would focus personally on Unit 1, geographical thinking. I think foundational skills and content are always the most, I won't say the most important piece of a unit or curriculum process, but it's hard to, unless you have that foundation, it's hard to move forward. So I would say for myself, the indicators and objectives in Unit 1, and as well as the indicators and objectives in Unit 8. I mentioned that briefly before, that Unit 8 is essentially a capstone unit that encompasses all of the skills and content learned over the course of 2 years, a synthesis of ideas and skills and knowledge, similar to what you were discussing earlier, where you have multiple different contents, multiple different ideas being taught and discussed in one particular classroom. So that's what I would say.
So how are you going to flag that or include a misnomer for the LEAs? Or do
So,
you want to do that?
oh, definitely. Professional learning is going to be key in this rollout. And that's why we have planned such a robust engagement strategy with our LEA supervisors. It's going to be a process, and it's going to be something that we are going to work with them on the ground as much as we possibly can to be able to support them continually as we go through this rollout process for this frameworks. But it is
And
something.
I can also add to this as well, like super excited because one of the areas that the curriculum team has been doing over the past few months is talking to LEAs about high quality instructional curriculum, but also implementation supports. And what that means and what do you need as we support you with curriculum. So we already have a robust body of information on what they need so that as we're building our supports and capacity, we can be, it can be very aligned. The other great thing is that in social studies, Finn is his learning lab. Finn, when is your learning lab coming up for social studies?
February. Yep,
February.
all throughout February.
Right. So this is a professional learning model, and I think it's pretty full right now, where
It is,
LEAs
yep.
are actually going to be able to come together and visit classrooms to see this in practice and talk with each other. And again, that'll also and engage. We have a partner that will be providing professional learning as well. So that will also, Dr. Johnson, I think, get to your point for us to hear on the ground, what are the struggles, but also we've contacted with LEAs that feel like they're doing a really good job in teaching some of these standards so that we sort of like get in the weeds. And then Finn and his team, they're actually been going out and doing site reviews in the LEAs, like in classrooms, not in central office. And so it's this, you got to get on the ground, you got to get in the weeds with the LEAs to get to the point you are exactly making, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Dr. Maile McCarthy?
So to follow up on what you asked, Dr. Johnson, and then what you said, Dr. Collins, does support mean a variety of resources and materials that teachers can use? Because I think the hardest thing for teachers is, how am I going to find good quality? And that being said, I don't think giving out one set of quality materials. I think that the option for different kinds of materials, teachers are busy. And so I think one of the biggest supports is how would you support with materials?
Absolutely. So the other piece that we've been building is as we build out high quality instruction materials, that is a component of it, where we'll actually bringing in teachers and paying them to help us design resources aligned to the standards. And also the vision is that we've been auditing our websites over the past year so that all of the content areas can have resources ready to go, like we've seen in other states, a space for professional learning, a space for resources, parents going right on the website. Because you're right, they don't have time. And this is part of what they're asking for. And through our high quality instruction material process, we also as a state would be pre-identifying these are the resources based on like Ed Reports, they are like the gold standard, have identified as high quality for them. So they don't have to do that legwork at all. So absolutely, you are absolutely correct.
Any other questions or comments? Would any member of the committee care to entertain a motion to send a recommendation to the full board at our next board meeting concerning the adoption of these materials? Dr. Maile McCarthy?
So moved.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Paul? So any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'm going to call for a vote for us to send a recommendation that we approve these materials to the board at the next board meeting. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, I think that's unanimous. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, I think that passed unanimously, so we will recommend to the board that we approve adoption of these frameworks. Thank you so much for the presentations and the time you took and the excellent outreach in developing.
Thank
these
you all, and thank you for your questions. We
Yeah,
really
thank you so
appreciate
much.
it. We're super excited.
Yes,
Have a
thank
good
you.
evening.
Thank you. Great work.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. And now we're moving into our COMAR item for this evening. And who is presenting the COMAR? Is it
Mary Gable, I think, is on.
Mary? Okay, Dr. Gable?
Thank you. Thank you for your patience at the beginning. I was having computer problems. I'm on my third computer in my office, and this one I think is working. So I know some days they just want to be cranky. So I am going to pull up my screen and go through the document. And you can let me know.
It's there.
You're good? Okay,
Yep.
so what I'm going to do,
Make it a little bigger, that would be good.
make it bigger. Let's
Yeah.
see if we can do that. Better?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
I've got to keep it so you can see it.
Mhm.
So what I'm going to do is go through the highlights. There's a lot of documents, as you saw, so I'm going to kind of scroll through and highlight it for you. So this is COMAR 13A 080117, which is school use of reportable offenses. And I also want to mention that Amanda Wright is on, our AG, who's worked with us on this, and also Caitlin Quigley, I think, is also on here, who is the coordinator of special projects in my office, who is also has worked on it. So this is on school use of reportable offenses, and this is permission to republish. We are requesting to republish because it was published in the Maryland Register. We brought it to you. I think it was in July. I have the date on another page here, and it was you gave unanimous approval to publish this in the Maryland Register. It was published from October 6th to November 6th, and we received comments from 3 different entities. Based on the review of that, which we're going to do this evening, we are recommending really 3 3 revisions to the regulation. They are determined to be substantive. Of course, we have our AGs review that, and therefore we're requesting the regulation needs to go out again. So basically a reportable offense, this is information that was in the regulation before, but I know that some of you are new and did not hear this presentation. But to focus, there's a lot of information here. I'm just going to scroll to the definition. A reportable offense is an offense that occurred off school grounds, not school time, not a field trip, not event. It is totally disassociated with the school, but it is determined to be a significant arrest. So a student, something happened. It could be a robbery. It could be some gang related, as you can see before you. The student was arrested. It was determined that it's part of a significant arrest, and it's therefore called a reportable offense. There are requirements of that reportable offense, which I'm going to go through, that require notification. And excuse me, as I mentioned, here it is. It was brought before the board on July 25th, requesting permission to publish. The 3 groups that provided information, one was the Maryland Coalition to Reform School Discipline. You have the actual letter. The second one was the Maryland Suspension Representation Project. You also have that letter, and then Anne Arundel County Public Schools. The 2 groups, we have met with them and had the dates are in this transmittal. We had met with them before. The comments suggested revisions to certain items. One was definitions, one was a safety determination, appeal and review procedures, and the other one is a school's obligation under specific portions of the regulation and data collection. So I'm going to show you the specific revisions that we have, and then I'm going to go through a document that we prepare for any regulation that goes out for public comment. There are times when a regulation goes out and you really get no comments, or you get a letter that says we're very much in favor of this from perhaps a school system. In this case, we did get public comment. So this is the regulation that went out. This is the way it's published in the Maryland Register. So as a reminder, if it is in brackets, it is language that is being edited out of the regulation. And if it's in italics, it is new language. When we bring this to you originally, the edited language that is being edited out is generally in red, and the new language italics is highlighted in yellow. What we have done here for this regulation is to highlight in yellow the language that is new, and that is, this is language that has been recommended through one of the submissions of the stakeholders, of which MSDE, which has reviewed all of them, is accepting this regulation, this edited language, and is suggesting that we put it into the regulation, which is the reason for going out. What you see highlighted before you is a student with a disability, means a student eligible under basically IDEA, which you're very familiar with. That language was there. What was not there before was Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So we are adding students with a 504. If there was a student arrested and there would be, that student was a 504. The, excuse me, the next change that we are recommending, and I will go into more comments on this when I go through the specific recommendations, that is that the notice of the arrest, and this has been language that we have had for a long time, that the notice of the arrest for reportable offense may not be the sole basis for a change in the student's regular school program. What occurs when there is a reportable offense is that the event has to be, the police basically have to notify the superintendent, the principal of the school, and a school security officer, if there is one, of this reportable offense, of this arrest. The school then has to review, and there in this regulation are extensive steps that the school needs to take, has to review and determine if there are actions in order to ensure the safety of the school that must be taken as a result of the arrest. The arrest is not a discipline matter, but there may be circumstances, and of which, I'll be pretty graphic, there could be an assault on a student, and the student is in that school. It was a pretty significant assault, could be a sexual assault, and there's a determination of the school that the student who did the reportable offense should not remain in that school. Does not mean the student should not be educated, but the student should not remain in that same school. But the notice is not the sole basis of the change of the student's regular school placement. Once we add something, we have to change numbering. And so that's some of it. And then the next item, which is in the new 6, is a requirement that if after the conference, so this is a conference with the principal, and if the principal is recommending a removal of the student from the regular school program, that recommendation must go to the local superintendent, and the student or the student's parents or guardian may appeal the removal to the local board within 15 calendar days after receipt of the written determination and receipt of notice of appeal rights. The notice of appeal rights is what was missing. And that was a recommendation which MSDE is recommending that we accept, that in that letter, which is a standard letter, the appeal rights must be there. And MSDE, as a matter of fact, will prepare a document to give to all LEAs, who can distribute it to all the principals in the school, that they could just attach that language, attach the information. And I'm in my office, so my lights are going to go out. Get the lights on so I'm not sitting in the dark. And I do have other lamps, but we'll try that. Sorry. That we as MSDE will provide information to the LEA so that they have their appeal rights. So there's a little bit more changing of numbering, and then there are different places where the same language gets added. In the case that you see before you, this is a student with a disability or a 504, and that language is making sure that we add that. And that includes the language that we're recommending for changes. What you see before you now is the document that we prepare, and this includes every recommendation that was made to the regulation when we published it in the Maryland Register. So I'm going to go through these, and you can let me know how much detail you want, but I'm going to try to go through at a level that is clear, but not way in the weeds for you. These are recommendations from the Maryland Coalition to Reform School Discipline. One of the recommendations was to revise the definition of a regular school program, which we included, which they wanted to make a change of the school that they attended prior to the charge. We are recommending to maintain the language that we have, which is basically saying that the school is where the student gets instruction, where their courses are, and we do not recommend a change in the definition of the regular school program. We believe that it reinforces the balance between the right of the student with a reportable offense to maintain access to the educational program and the safety of a specific school. The next recommendation, and I will tell you, you're going to find some duplication when we go to the next letter, is to define imminent threat of serious harm. That has been recommended in both. The recommendation of MSDE is that we need to review every place that the definition of imminent threat of serious harm is, as a department, work with some other stakeholders to define imminent threat of serious harm, and we will bring that back to you, that it is not a term that should be defined exclusively here for reportable offenses. And I will tell you where it's included. It's included in the discipline regulation. It's included in suspension for pre-K to 2. It's included in restraint and seclusion, and it's included in reportable offenses. We agree that we need to work on that, but it should, all of those pieces of COMAR should be included.
Mary, it looks like, sorry, it looks like Dr. Johnson has her hand raised.
Thank you. And I can't see because I had to.
Yeah.
Yes.
I figured.
Dr. Johnson. Yeah, I'm sorry. You have to tell me. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I thought maybe we were going to wait until you concluded all of your presentation, but I just wanted to know, when you said the school would determine, is that just the principal who determines the offensive, or are we recommending that a body or team of individuals such as the student support team, or the if it's a student with a disability, the IEP team?
So if it's a student with a disability, then you have to implement all rights of the student who has the IEP or the 504.
What about a student who doesn't?
And the student who doesn't, generally it is the principal who may very well delegate it to the assistant principal, who may engage teachers who have the student, may engage the school counselor. That would be a determination of the school to decide who in the school would you would need to gather information from. So the regulation does not state who it should be, but that would be at a school level to determine who knows the student. That may be a cause to engage the school counselor or teachers of the student or coach if the school decided to do that.
So would it not be cleaner just to say the student support team instead of leaving that responsibility on one or two individuals whose parents may come back and say, you know, so-and-so doesn't like my child. But if you have a group of individuals who've made that decision, it's more likely that the decision is being validated.
That was not the recommendation of the letter that we are including here. That would be another consideration for the regulation, which we would need to look at as to where we would embed that if we make that recommendation.
Well, I really make that recommendation. I don't think it should be one individual who decides what happens with the student.
Okay. Okay. So I will make that note and we can, we'll take that back. Any other questions, Dr. Johnson?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Certainly.
Yeah, I have a question, or basically I want to support what Dr. Johnson said. When regulation is not clear and ambiguous, there are appeals that come back to the state board. And it's very hard to evaluate unless there are some clear regulations upon which we should lean. So, and I do agree that you don't want to be too specific because maybe it depends on the situation and the student. But I do think there should be language that shows it should be a team of individuals that are chosen. I'm not looking for specificity, but I do agree with Dr. Johnson that it should be clear that it's a team and not one person making that decision.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
So I can just respond in terms of looking at, I want to make sure that the state board members are clear on kind of what the process looks like. So what happens is that a student is arrested in the community, that if it is a specific charge, so if there's a specific arrest, then in that case, only in those circumstances is the LEA notified. The first initial determination about whether there's a safety issue within the building, that's where we're currently have it with the school principal. And if there is a recommendation that the student is going to be removed when it's less than 10 days, then there has to be a conference with the child's parent, and they also have to invite the child's attorney to participate. If it's determined that there's going to be a long-term removal, so more than 10 days, then there's a second layer of protection, and that's where the statutory change came into effect. And that now requires that if there's going to be that long-term removal, then it has to go to the superintendent or the superintendent's designee. And the only time that the student may be removed is if the superintendent's designee conducts an investigation and finds that the child is an imminent threat of serious harm. So that aligns with the state board's regulations for school discipline. So what MSDE has done is mirror the processes so that the processes look similar for school discipline protections as well as the due process protections for reportable offenses. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was clear on what that process looks like.
Thank you, Amanda. Those are all the procedures. there's a lot in this regulation, so I really appreciate. I'm focusing on these particular things, but it's important to have the whole picture that surrounds it. Go
Do we
ahead.
also have questions from Mr. Paul and yeah, I can't see who has their hands up. Mr. Paul, did you have a question?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair McCusker. I'm actually all set. That last spiel addressed a question that I had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I believe, Susan, do you have a question?
Yes.
Is that Dr. Getty? Oh, good. I didn't know you were here this evening. Hello, Dr. Getty.
Dr. Gable, it just occurred to me that by the time the students are juniors and seniors in high school, they have multiple education locations in their regular high school, the community college, internships, as well as career and tech. When I did not have that perspective when I read through this, are you confident that the regulations address the multiple locations a student could be educated at one time and outline the decision-making where I don't know a circumstance where it would be okay to be in one location but not another.
There could be.
Right. So I guess I'm asking, does this address the multiple location? Because I think it's very prevalent for juniors and seniors.
I think that, so Amanda did a really nice job of going through the whole process. The case is looking at, here's this arrest, it occurred off school property. You're now looking at a student and identifying all the things that go into the education of the student. So you're looking at the incident and the safety repercussions, but you're also looking at the education of the student along with the safety of the students and adults in the school. You're absolutely right. A student may be going to the community college, and frankly, that may not be a problem. Or it may be. As any student, you would have to look at the total education of this student. When I'm looking at a student that I may have, it may be, it's fine. It's in the best interest of the student that the education remains exactly as it is. There may be an apprenticeship, there may be education in that class, there may be community college, and you're going to look at the entire picture of the student and where that education is going on. So by setting, it is where is that student being educated, and it is incumbent upon the principal, the parents, as Amanda mentioned. If there is a recommendation to move the student, then it would be another level of investigation, which is the superintendent's designee, superintendent's office.
Okay, I guess that's one part of it is the multiple locations, but the other part of it for Amanda is who gets told? Does the community college, are they entitled to the information? Are the internship business owners entitled to that information? So we're not talking about just the public school. If the law says the arresting people tell the public school, that might not be enough for the total education experience.
So I think that's something that we'll need to discuss a little bit further, because what is also at play is that we are talking about very sensitive student information, and there are some confidentiality provisions that would have to be looked at in terms of what information, first of all, could be shared, and then we also have the second question of what should be shared, right? So I think those are good questions to discuss. that, MSDE, we can take it back and talk with MSDE and come back and discuss what kind of legal implications there are as it relates to how information can be shared.
It just seems a little out of place for the LEA to make the decision that involves other locations that are outside the school system. I think that's a little bit of a hiccup in the whole process. We're thinking about students in a very traditional sense when we read the regulations. And I just don't think that's true anymore in the general education setting. Thank you for listening.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And let's see, anyone else with their hand up? I think.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Dr.
This
Wilcox?
is, hi, thank you. One question for you, like, because of racial profiling and the likelihood that students could be wrongfully accused of criminal activity, I'm questioning and wondering about arrest versus convicted, where there's some kind of a process that was gone through to, formally evaluate the situation of the student and the protection of sensitive information, when the student may not actually be responsible for what they're being accused of. And there's something that doesn't sit well with me about this situation. I understand the need to protect students in the building and the need to protect faculty, but I also think about the student, and it seems like just for an arrest that maybe they're not even guilty of a crime, or I don't know. There's just something that's making me feel uneasy. And maybe it's the urgency, like if there's an arrest, something has to be put in place to protect people in the building. And a trial could take a long time, and therefore there's an immediate workflow that needs to happen after. But anyway, I don't really have a question. I'm just voicing the feeling that I have right now of concern about that issue.
One thing we do, Dr. Wilcox, is, I think that was Dr. Wilcox, right?
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Going by your voices, is we do collect data on that. And in one of the answers in here gives you a little bit of data that it is a dilemma that we have certainly talked about. This is when an arrest, but one, it is not, it is a significant arrest that falls into certain categories that are defined in the law. So it's not any arrest. It is an arrest that of, in particular, reportable offense that, and it's a crime of violence, and there's a whole list of the specific laws that the student has. And so part of this regulation is that we collect data, and we are collecting data like we've never collected before about what those arrests are. But you're correct, it's an arrest, and then it may be months before. So that's why I think the regulations are there to protect the student and to make sure that decisions are not made without careful and thoughtful consideration and weighing all the factors. But there is there's statute, which there is statute on this, which is why, and then we have extensive regulations on taking a look at offenses and making decisions. And there's some other things about when the decision is made, making sure that that schools are revisiting the case on a regular basis. And I will share with you where excuse me, where we have some of the data. Other questions, Ms. McCusker, or go on?
I can't see any, so I don't know if there are any more questions. If nobody chimes in, then please
Okay.
go ahead.
I'm going to move forward. There are a couple of statements about imminent threat of serious harm, and this is the one I'm showing you right now is recommends adding that the notice of reportable offense or arrest alone may not be the basis of for a change on the student's regular school program to the proposed regulation, and this is a substantive change. This is citing certain cases, state board members that you have seen before the state board. And we did review this to really address the recommendations and the things that you're expressing to make sure that a school is thoughtful and doesn't say, oh, there's an arrest, then boom, we're going to make these decisions. So that is a change that we are including. And I didn't realize that this copy that is here, that you have a statement, a note. So sometimes you look at them in a certain format and they're not there, and then you look in another and they are there. So what the clarification of making a determination, we made the recommendation that that will be in guidance. Here's another place where explain the meaning of make a determination. As you know, we put a lot of information in regulations, and then some of the information, and then there's other information that goes in guidance that is not language to the level that it should be in the regulation, but there is guidance that we give in making in this example, in making a determination. The appeal timeline and notice of appeal rights, I've already mentioned that we're putting language in to make sure that the family gets the appeal rights, and that language and Dr. Wright wanted, when we reviewed it, wanted to make sure that we MSDE prepared language for that. This review the procedures when a charge is resolved. The information there will be that it's being reviewed every 45 days. And so when a charge is resolved, by the time you get the conference, and as Amanda said, one of the things that we required to do is that we're required to invite an attorney. That's new language. So if the family has an attorney, the school is required to invite the attorney to the meeting so that the attorney, and I think this covers some of the concerns that you have to make sure that the students' rights are reviewed. 504, we've already mentioned, and I really apologize. I didn't realize the one I'm pulling up here, and maybe the one you have is getting, these are notes that we went back and forth on, and I apologize. We'll make sure that this is not the one that goes before the board. This is, I think, language that we've done. This is, this letter is from the Maryland Office of the Public Defender, Disability Rights Maryland, and Public Justice Center, members of the Maryland Suspension Representation Project. I will say to you now that these recommendations are pretty much the same as the previous letter, and the responses are the same. This is a 504 and other appeal rights, making sure we include those, making sure the offense alone is not going to cause for the removal of the student. And imminent threat, serious harm, we're including that. I've already talked about that, so I won't go over that again. Determination and removal of the regular school program, again, same recommendations, really mirrored both letters were the same. Appeal timeline, review the procedures, to review safety procedures. The recommendation was every 30 days. We are sticking with the 45 days for the school, and once that determination is made, it could be on the 35th day and getting a conference for the student. We are continuing student with disability. We've talked about the students with disability level of service. That's requirement to make sure that the student continues with the level of service. Community offenses that are not a reportable offense, it's very clear on what is a reportable offense. When we collected the data, we made sure if it wasn't a reportable offense that we talked with the school system. Anne Arundel County gave a letter, and they had the same questions about imminent threat, which we really need to address. Safety determinations from the school systems, their appeal rights, which we are adding to their appeal rights, students with disabilities, including the 504. Data collection, we are collecting data on not only are we looking at the offense, but what occurred with the student, what was there a removal, and I went through quickly. One of the items that I wanted you to know, when we collected the data, this was in one of the responses, the LEAs indicated that 86.7% of the students accused of reportable offense were retained in their school. So you've got about 87% of the cases of the students are retained, so there's not a change. 3.5% of them were placed in a virtual school. 3.8 were placed on home and hospital. 2.3 were placed in an alternative school, which a school system may have. 0.6 were placed in a night school or evening high school, which would be for a high school student. And 0.3% were transferred to another school, either within or outside of the district. The remaining 2.8% of the students were detained in juvenile or adult correction facilities, but that's a determination of the judge and the court. That's not a determination of the of the school, sorry. So the next set of materials that you have are the actual letters. I think if you see the actual letters, you're going to see exactly what we put in, and that was a cut and pasting that we took their comment, make sure you had the rationale. So you have those letters, which I will not go through. The comments there and the recommendations are what we included in the chart, so you could look at them all together. And the cases are here. You can see some of the sightings. So I'm going to stop sharing and go back, and happy to address any questions that you may have.
Any other questions from anyone who is attending today? So members of the committee, we can do a couple of things here. We can send the reg back for them to address the idea of having a group. If you weren't satisfied with the explanation that Ms. White gave about actually it being the superintendent that has to approve that, and the concerns about multiple locations for students' regular program, we can either have them take that back and not go forward, or we can make a recommendation for approval pending that information. I leave it to you to make a motion on how you'd like to proceed with those couple of things that we had questions about as a committee. Anyone want to make a move? Nobody's making a move. Okay.
It's a tough one. So
yeah,
this is a tough one. So I don't think this is something we take lightly. Mm-hmm. So I think if we're going to make a recommendation, I think we have to feel as secure as we can feel about the recommendation. and I'm just processing. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I mean, how right this minute am I gonna be able to come up with a suggestion that I feel comfortable enough with? So I'm good for rhetoric, but I don't have something that's actionable right now.
Okay.
Would you like for us to have a fairly quick review and give you some language? I mean, not tonight. It has gone out for public comment for 30 days. It'll go out again. But you've made some recommendations regarding the student support team, the multiple locations, and of course, the sensitivity. Amanda talked about the sensitivity of language, but just giving you things to think about.
Yeah. I think if I'm reading the room, that the committee is not comfortable pushing forward with a recommendation until we have the new language.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the point that Dr. Getty made is very important. Schools cannot direct different entities of what to do. So we have to have real clear language around that.
Okay. So Ms. Gable, if you can, and Ms. White, if you guys can take this back and try to rework those couple of things, and then let us know once you have it, and then we can figure out next steps from there.
Okay.
Okay.
We can do that, and we will communicate to Zach when we have language and get back to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate all your time and effort.
Certainly. Thank you.
Okay, and then lastly this evening, we have a very quick legislative review, as today was the first day of the opening day of the legislative session. I am sitting in Annapolis as we speak. I was at a small reception. Well, I don't know how small it was, pretty crowded actually, but I was at a legislative reception and stayed down here for the meeting this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Aileen and to Mr. Hands to give us a quick legislative update.
Thank you, Chair McCusker. Just I'll very briefly run through a couple of things, and then I'll let Dr. Aileen add anything. So you got a legislative bill tracker last night. It's kind of the first iteration of this. Has about 55 to 60 pieces of legislation on it. As you'll note, in most of them, some of them we didn't have bill text for yet. Some of them were only posted on Monday or Tuesday of this week. So staff are still really working through the implications of a lot of them. So we won't really have much to go through in terms of a bill review tonight. The one item I did want to just mention to the committee is that the bill that the state board submitted is House Bill 88, and that has been scheduled for hearing on January the 30th. Since this group has already approved that through the legislative platform, I don't think there's a need to vote on a position for that tonight, but just as a heads up, President Crawford and Dr. Michael will be going to Annapolis to testify in support of that bill, which is House Bill 88, and its Senate cross file is Senate Bill 266. Just as a reminder, this is the bill that would immediately vest the state superintendent in the state retirement and pension system to make that position more consistent with other cabinet level officials in the state. So happy to take any questions on that. I don't think there is too much else to add tonight. As Chair McCusker said, it's the first day of session, so we're bound to see several hundred more bills in the coming days that we'll bring to your attention as staff are able to work through them.
Yep, and I don't have anything, I don't have much else to add. Zach covered everything. So we're trucking away at the bills. As you saw, Zach shared the PDF of what we have on the tracker so far. and we'll continue to add to it, and you all will continue to get updates on that as well.
And I
Well,
would
Adam,
encourage, go ahead. Sorry.
I'd just say, I will add, if you have any questions about something that you see on there, please don't hesitate to reach out. But it's only been a couple of days since we've really been able to see anything. So I know that Dr. Eileen and Laurel and the various divisions at the department are still working through a lot of the first batch of legislation, all of which were pre-filed bills. So they kind of all came on one day over the weekend.
So as we work through the legislative session, and as you're looking at the bill tracker, if there's a bill there that is of particular interest to you and you're reading through it, make sure that you're looking at it through the lens of our legislative platform that we've already approved as a board. We will be bringing them to the committee as is in a timely way, and prioritizing them based on hearings, and so we won't just be kind of like picking and choosing this one and that one. We will be prioritizing by need for a hearing. We will be leaning heavily on MSDE and their staff, because as they look at the bills, they are the ones who are generally have their day-to-day work and expertise affected by the bills, so that we will be using and leaning into their expertise for recommendations for when we might take a position on a bill. But all of that will be filtered through the platform that we have already approved as a board. And as part of that platform, we did support House Bill 88 for the immediate vesting of the superintendent. So I don't think we need to take an official vote on that tonight, because the whole board has already approved the platform. So we don't know how frequently we're going to need to pull people together for something in a timely manner, but please keep an eye on things just in case we need to pull the group together for a timely vote on something that's very important. But we will try to minimize pop-up meetings for lack of a better term. Does anyone have any other questions going into the legislative session, other than get ready, gear up, here it comes. All right. Okay, well, thank you everybody for being here this evening and for your thoughtful discussion. And we certainly appreciate the time of our MSDE staff on these evening meetings. We know it makes a long day for you, and we appreciate everything that you're doing to support our work as a state board. So please, if you're a member of the public, please stay tuned for any extra meetings that are outside of the regularly scheduled meetings. They will certainly be posted in a timely manner, so that if you wish to view our meetings, that you will be able to do so. Thank you again, everyone, for a good evening, and I look forward to seeing all of you at our meeting tomorrow. Have a good evening, everyone.